Welcome to part 2 of our notes on population. As always, hopefully you have a copy of the fill-in-the-blank notes. They will help guide you through the notes, and they'll make it a little bit quicker for you. And if you don't have a copy of the notes, you can always get them online, or you can do it the old-fashioned way. Just ask your parents about this, but more than likely they had to write everything out longhand and didn't have fill-in-the-blank notes. Now, you hopefully have already watched part 1 of the notes, and you might be wondering, why is there a part 1, a part 2, and a part 3? Well, the reason why there's these parts is because I'm trying to keep all the videos really short. Normally this would take a full class period and then probably part of a second class period, but I'm going to be able to get all these videos done in approximately 30 minutes. And one of the reasons why we can do that is because several times I'll just ask you to pause the video and study the notes on by yourself, study the cartoon, the picture, and then when we talk about it in class, we can discuss it, where normally in class I'd stop right then and discuss it with you. So here we are, we're taking a look at predictions for the world population. Again, no one can tell you for sure how the population of the world is going to go in the future. When we look at where it's been in the past, you can see for many, many years there's little growth, and there's actually times here during the Great Plague, the Black Death, that it actually dropped. But since the Industrial Revolution, it's gone up dramatically. Now, they call this type of curve a J-curve. And, when you look at it, it's like, why a J-curve? Well, one, it's got this curve here. Some people say, well, it looks more like an L. Well, an L would be like this. But it actually looks like a sidewards J, where it's got the curve here, and even that's probably not as good as it could be. And it almost looks like it could be a backwards J, where if you watch it going down like this, it comes like this. And so this type of curve is called a J curve for population growth. And ultimately where it's going to go, no one really knows for sure. So here we're looking at human population through 2050. Some people are predicting that we will actually get up over 9 billion people by then. Other people are predicting we won't get that high, that we'll get up to past 7 billion, maybe 8 billion, and then the population is going to start to drop for a while again. So projected population growth, where are we looking at? What's this right here? We can see this little area right here. This is North America. This lighter area is where we're having population growth in Europe. Then we have Latin America, Sub-Sahara, Africa, North Africa, and look at this one, the Asian countries, Asia, Oceania, and this includes places like China, India. This is where a large chunk of the population of our planet is going to be coming from. And when you look at this top layer, which is the United States, we're actually pretty stable. We're not growing that fast. So human population trends since 1950 have gone up tremendously, and from somewhere between 2 and 3 billion up to over 6, and actually by 2012, by 2013, it's 2013 now, we're actually over 7 billion people on our planet. So population growth rate trends, in other words, what's the population growth rate? You can see for the longest time it was going up, and then all of a sudden it dipped way down, but then it went way back, shot way back up, and now it's been steadily declining. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but because we have so many people on our planet to begin with, it'll take years for the population on our planet to stabilize and then maybe even drop some if you're, and that's good news. Well, it's bad news if you're concerned about overpopulation, but it's probably good news that we are slowing down, because if our population growth rate would still be way up here, we'd be way over 7 billion people by now. So where are most of the people in the world? When we look at this, the dark blue right here indicates billion people. So obviously you got China, you got India, and they're actually number 1, number 2 in the world, and we're actually number 3 in the world, and I believe they're 4th. And a lot of the other ones will fluctuate and vary from year to year, but the top 3 have always been the same for the longest time. So this is an interesting pie chart. If you want to pause the video, you can take a longer look at this, but it takes a look at where all the people in the world are if they were in a pie chart. And the interesting things with this is look at India, look at China, and then look at India. They take up a large chunk of the pie. And then there's the rest of us. So what are the ranks? Where are we located? Are we number 1? No. China is the top country in the world as far as total number of people. Their growth rate is in red, 0.49%, and the percent of world population is 19.22. As I've stated in the last video, you got to be careful with these numbers. They're going to change all the time, and from source to source they might be slightly different. So we try and get our information from places like the United Nations, so we can get fairly accurate numbers. But again, different resources have different numbers, so we do the best we can. So if you got slightly different numbers, I understand that, and depending on what year it is, and we have updated it, but we haven't updated as of yesterday, but we updated it in the past. This is the most current numbers we've come up with. Then we have India, followed by the United States, Indonesia, and Brazil. So here's one interesting thing you can take a look at. Look at these facts. China's population, they're doing a tremendous amount of work on trying to limit their population growth, because they understand if they have too many people, it's too many people that have to find jobs for, it's too many people that have to feed. So they got a very controversial policy. It's the two-child rule and two-child law, which means all families can only have 2 children. That's why their rate's so low. It's actually almost half of ours. And when you look at that, the United States at 0.96, we're actually one of the fastest growing developed countries in the world. But here's something that's interesting. 1.3%. It's not going to be too long in the future that India is going to actually be the #1 country in the world as far as population is concerned. Now, I'm not sure if that's something you want to be #1 with, but it's growing tremendously fast. Here's the other thing you want to take a look at. Even though India, or let's say China is only growing at 0.49%. Let's look at Brazil. Brazil is growing over twice as fast as China. But if I ask you the question, which country will have a bigger impact on world population, it's still not going to be Brazil. It's still going to be China. And you might say, well, why is it China? China only has a growth of 0.49%, where Brazil is growing by 1.1%. Well, let me ask you this. If you had a 1.1% interest rate, and you had that on, say, $1,000, would you be happy? Or would you like a 0.49% interest rate? Half of this, would you prefer that on, say, $1 million? Most of us would say, oh, I'll take this one on $1 million. And I might say, well, why? The interest rate's only half. Because it has so much more to begin with. So China will have a much, much bigger impact on population growth rates, or on population growth for many, many years to come, compared to all other countries other than probably India, because it has so many people to begin with. Oh, here we go. Now, the United States is one of the most populous countries in the world. You saw that it's third, but here we're looking at a bar graph. You can see we're a distant third. We're not even close to being in the race. And there's a lot of countries that are not too far behind us, like Indonesia, Brazil, Pakistan. So when we look at places like this, India, Brazil, they're not that far away compared to us being close to India and China, where we're not even close to them. Now, the United States is the 3rd most populous country in the world, following China and India. The population of the United States is approximately 313 million. Again, that changes daily. Although the 313 million is pretty steady for a while, because it's going to take a while to get to 314 million. Now, remember, we got to add the people that are being born. We also have to subtract people that are dying. Now, last I checked, our growth rate was 9.6% yearly, and it does make us one of the world's fastest growing industrialized nations or developed countries. Now, in 2010, immigration actually added approximately 1 million people to our country, 1 million naturalized citizens. So not everybody who's being added to the population is being born here. A lot of times people are moving to our country, which is understandable. We've always been a melting pot for the world. People have always come to the United States. So where does the immigration come from? Well, this is interesting. You know, back in the early part of the last century, 1901, 1910, this is when a lot of my ancestor came to this country, and we came from Europe, and that's where most of the people come to the United States came from. But over the course of 100 years, that's not the case anymore. Here's your European countries, but now most of the people coming to our country actually come from Latin America, Mexico, Argentina, places south of our southern border. and population increased by decades, you can see that in 1900 to 1910 we grew quite a bit, and then things dropped a little bit, but now all of a sudden we're starting to add quite a few people each decade again. Now, the Census Bureau does project that by 2050, the United States population will exceed 390 million people. Again, do they know for sure? No, it's just a projection. And, we are doing a good job of getting there, but we are starting to slow down a bit as well. And population density is projected to increase from a current of 76 people per square mile to 111 people per square mile. So what exactly does that mean? Does that mean in every square mile you're going to find 76 people? No, it's an average. It's an average. So you may have two squares right next to each other, and in this square you have a huge metropolitan area where there's lots of people living. They may have 500 people per square mile, and then all of a sudden you got all these other places where you got little cities, little towns everywhere where they may be way under. So again, this is just an average, but you can see we do add quite a few. Now, this does conclude part 2 of our flip notes on population, and in part 3 we'll finish up the notes. They may go a little longer, we'll see. But again, as always, we'll see you on the flip side, and if you have any questions, just please ask them in class. Thanks. Goodbye.